Now we're going to describe South Asia's weather and climate patterns. We're going to see differences in time of year, but also differences on one side of the region versus the other. Here we're looking at temperature. And when we think about temperature, there's some variations that we see across Earth's surface and some reasons for that. One of the key reasons I've mentioned is the role of upland areas. And that's very clearly seen here when we look at the Himalayan mountains. I mean, they're very much that abrupt change where we go from yellow and greens, and then where the Himalayan mountains are, we see that white, that very light color in the Tibetan Plateau, which really sticks out on the other side. So here we can see definitely the role of altitude in terms of temperature we find. In terms of the general patterns we see in South Asia, especially on these areas more lowland, not in the Himalayas, not in the upland areas. It is fairly hot here. It's hot to warm, so it's not like what we'd see here. It's definitely more tropical. It's definitely hotter, definitely warmer. They're going to see a lot more of the A climate here. You're going to see a lot more of the C climate, a little bit more of what we'd find maybe in the southeast part of the United States. We also have the role of continentality. So, of course, if you're along a coastline, you're going to have moderated temperatures. But when you go deeper into the continent, especially there, northern India, northern Pakistan, you're going to see more of that continentality effect. So you're going to see more variations in temperatures throughout the year, unlike a place like Sri Lanka or there in the southern tip of India, where temperatures are going to be much more moderated. Further, you're going to see also the role of latitude. Of course, there, the southern tip of India, Sri Lanka, it's warmer because it's closer to the equator, and as you go farther away, it gets colder. Now we see the summertime temperatures, and of course the Himalayan mountains and the Tibetan Plateau, once again, that a very high upland area. It doesn't even get that warm in the summertime. Other variations we can see here, there the Thar Desert, that area that's very, very, very dry. We can see actually in the case of July is where we find the hottest temperatures, the reds, there in Pakistan. What that is essentially the absence of clouds. Once again, in a tropical area gets very, very intense sun, solar energy. It's going to really superheat that surface and thus cause warmer temperatures. But the same variations I mentioned beforehand regarding latitude and being along a coastline, altitude we see play out in the summertime map. Now let's look at the other side of climate. We look at temperature. Now let's look at precipitation. So in terms of precipitation, the general pattern we see here is in the eastern part of South Asia, it's wet. And as you go to the west, it gets drier. We already know that. We've already seen some particular examples of that when we look at the Thar Desert. There in the extreme, western part of South Asia, there in Pakistan, it's of course quite dry. It's a desert. We also see orographic precipitation at work. You're going to see higher precipitation levels along the Himalayan mountains, but also there the Western Ghats. In the case of the Western Ghats, because it's also so southern and tropical, here you actually have a tropical climate. So it's almost a rainforest type of climate we find here. Because it's so wet, because of orographics, but also, I don't know if orographics is a term, but pornographics isn't. So anyway, we see orographic precipitation here, the Western Ghats, there in a very tropical area. And the July map further underscores the eastern part of South Asia, where we see purple. We see more rain on the eastern part, and as we go west, we see it definitely gets drier. And I can even show that in a bar graph. And so here we see average precipitation in depth, and we go ascending from left to right. And what do you know? This is also pretty much what we'd see from west to east. Afghanistan and Pakistan in the west, Bangladesh being in the east, and what do you know? As we go, we can see increasing amounts of precipitation as we go east.